Hi there, and welcome to another success story. Today we've got Jen, who you might know as Delighted to Meet You. Hi, Jen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
That's my pleasure. So straight away, everybody knows my first question: why did you become carnivore?
Well, to make a long story short, I struggled with some autoimmune issues for a long time, multiple decades, namely psoriasis. And so in my mid 30s, I went on an immunosuppressant injection to control that. And then I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I had one health problem after another, probably because I was immunosuppressed. And as I healed one thing at a time, I would just get another new problem. And then after about 6 months of dealing with that, I got the worst psoriasis outbreak I've ever had in my life while still on this immunosuppressant injection. And so by that point, I was just completely fed up, unwilling to continue doing standard medical care. And I knew there had to be something else out there I could do. And so I went to a naturopath, and he had a nutritionist in his office, and she's the one who told me about the diet. And at this point, it sounded crazy to me, but I was desperate and willing to try anything. And so that was how I first learned about it. And I went home and Googled it and learned about people like Michaela Peterson and Kelly Hogan and realized this is something I've not tried before. And I think maybe this could actually help me. And so that's how it all began.
And you said you heard it from somebody. Did you at first think this is really crazy? What was your gut feeling about it?
I thought it was incredibly crazy. And she kind of presented it like, you can do this carnivore diet, which is basically just eating meat, or you can do this other kind of elimination diet, which will include a lot of leafy greens and these other different vegetables and stuff. And I was like, okay, the vegetables sounds more normal, but the meat kind of sounds better. And I've done this with the vegetables and it hasn't helped me. Which, it's kind of interesting. She would give me two opposite things to try, but I don't think she was even a huge proponent of the carnivore diet. She just happened to have learned about it recently herself and was kind of experimenting with it. So I ended up really just being in the right place at the right time. And I would say for 10 minutes, I was like, this lady is nuts. But then as it sank in, it just started to feel a little bit more right.
So how long ago was that?
So that was about 2 years ago. And I've actually been 100% carnivore for 1 year. So the way that story goes is that 2 years ago, when she taught me about it, I did start the diet and I had some initial success, but I made some mistakes, like trying to be way too strict, basically doing a lion diet right out of the gate when I was still addicted to sugar and drinking a lot and just processed foods. And so while my skin was getting way better, I was struggling to stick with it and started binging after a while, because that's another thing I struggled with for decades, was binge eating. And so it became unsustainable for me for a while. And so after 4 to 6 months of kind of trying and failing, I took 6 months off completely, didn't try to be carnivore at all. And then 1 year ago tomorrow, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to be a carnivore. I don't want to be on a carnivore diet temporarily and then start adding things back. I don't want to have little cheats here and there. I just actually want to be a carnivore, because when I've eaten that way, that's the best I've ever felt. And so that's when I really went all in and haven't looked back at all.
And what was the reaction from sort of friends, family, and colleagues?
Well, the only negative reaction was with the guy I was dating at the time. He knew me as his girlfriend who would drink with him on the weekends and eat junk food and all that. And so it was a big switch for him to say, okay, I'm not going to drink now and I'm only going to eat meat. So that was really hard for a relationship, and we ended up breaking up. Not necessarily because of that, but I mean, that was part of the issue for sure. But from my friends and my family, colleagues, I mean, they saw me and how sick I was and how terrible my skin was looking. So while they thought it was strange, and they still do, they are fully supportive and see what miraculous changes that I've had from it. So they've been on board for sure.
Yes, and it is miraculous. So in the edit, I will be putting up the pictures of your legs and your side, for instance. Is there anybody that's seen this miraculous change and and still thinks you shouldn't be doing this?
People on the internet, people will often say, okay, you look better, your skin looks better, but what about your clogged arteries and you're going to have a heart attack and you're going to get cancer and da 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 da. And I just can't understand how they could look at my before photo and think that I wasn't obviously very inflamed and very sick, and how now with completely clear skin and no objective signs of unhealth, that they could believe that I was better off eating terrible standard American diet type foods.
Yeah, it's crazy because your skin is an indicator, an outward indicator of your health, isn't it? And I can look at those photos, and anyone could look at those photos and think, well, this person was definitely doing something wrong, and now they must be doing something right. But just some people don't want to believe it, do they? So what conditions did you have then? Because you had psoriasis. What else did you have?
Yeah, the main thing was psoriasis. And then once I went on an immunosuppressant medication for that, I started having chronic strep throats, just one after another. And then I ended up with leukocytoclastic vasculitis, which is another autoimmune skin condition that's kind of, to a layman, maybe looks similar, but it was a completely different thing. It has to do more with the blood vessels than the skin. But unrelated to that, I also had binge eating for over 20 years. I mean, since I was about 15 and started trying to diet a little bit, I started binge eating all the time. So those were kind of the main kind of 4 problems: the binging, the strep throats constantly, the vasculitis, and the psoriasis, not to mention just chronic constipation for most of my life. And it got so bad that I actually had a colonoscopy at one point a few years ago, because my doctor was just baffled that I would go so infrequently, and they just wanted to make sure there was no blockage or something weird going on in there. And it was fine, but it's like the more fiber I ate, the less I pooped, basically.
And now are you 100% carnivore now then?
Yes, 100% carnivore. Now, sometimes during my last year of being a carnivore, I did include coffee. So I'd say technically that's not carnivore, but that was the only thing. Otherwise, I really just do meat, salt, water, eggs, and dairy sometimes. I've recently cut it out because it does seem to affect my skin. But I really don't even experiment with like spices or condiments or anything like that. I'm pretty strict.
And how has that affected your social life?
I just haven't let it affect it negatively. I went on a trip a month last year. So every month I went to a resort out of the country or some state to go on a little vacation or something. And I also was dating during that time. So I went on a lot of dates as a carnivore, and I've just figured out how to make it work. Sometimes I'll eat before going to dinner with friends, or I'll eat before going to like a buffet or something like that. Otherwise, I'll make sure that I'm going somewhere where there's going to be something there for me to eat, whether it's a burger or a steak or eggs or whatever. And I mean, sometimes that means that I've not been able to eat at all during the meal. I've just sat there and enjoyed the company of my friends. That's only happened once or twice, but I've just sort of mentally prepared myself for that, because there's nothing that I want to eat more than I want my skin to stay clear. And then when it comes to drinking, I've just gotten really used to doing like a sparkling water with a lime wedge on the cup, just so it's pretty and it looks like I'm drinking. But yeah, those are kind of the main tips that have worked for me.
You mentioned your skin there, but did it get to you mood-wise? Did it upset you and depress you?
Okay, I kind of missed the question. If you don't mind repeating that.
No, not at all. Your skin, when it was really bad, did that depress you? I mean, was that something that really got you down?
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard. You can imagine based on how it looked, and it was very, very uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't sleep well at night because I would be itching, and to the point that I would be bleeding from scratching myself so much. But I also always sort of had this mindset of, this is really bad, but I'm going to figure out how to make it better. And so just having hope really, really helped. I think when it's so uncomfortable and so unsightly and you're hopeless, I mean, there's nothing you can do but be depressed at that point. But when you just have a little bit of hope, it kept me from being depressed. I mean, I did not like it. I was uncomfortable and I was embarrassed, and, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it wasn't like I was in the depths of despair either.
Well, that's good. That's a testament to your character, actually. So this will go out on YouTube, but it'll also be a podcast. So if it's okay on the podcast edition, I'll put a PDF of your legs and your skin, because I think people really need to see what a big improvement it is. So the binge eating, has that subsided, and what do you put that down to if it has?
Yeah, so the binge eating, I had no idea that the carnivore diet would affect that in any way. And it has basically cured me of binge eating. At first, I couldn't understand why, but now I understand so much more because I've read more about it and tried to seek out more information. But I think a few things were keeping me binging. One was just kind of this constant roller coaster of glucose and insulin spikes from eating too much sugar. And so, my glucose would then crash because of the insulin response to the high glucose, and then I would crave more of the sweets. So that was one thing for sure going on. The other thing was I was just getting these constant dopamine hits from these delicious sweet foods, and then I was just seeking more and more of that, basically as a drug. And then I think that once I switched my diet and got rid of all the carbs, all the sweet stuff, all the even artificial sweeteners, anything that tasted sweet, I think that changed my gut microbiome to the point where, I'm not getting these false signals from the bugs in my gut to eat carbs. I just am stable with the fatty and high protein meats that I'm eating. So those three things biologically helped me so that then I could look at like an urge to eat crappy food from a rational mind, really just like, do I really want to eat ice cream? No, I definitely don't. I don't want to go back down that road. But before I got sort of those biological things under control, I couldn't think about an urge rationally. It was just like, oh I have to have the ice cream. There's no other choice. Like, I'm eating it right now. And then I would just go off the rails.
Yeah, it's something I hear all the time about, the binge eating being a big thing that subsides with carnivore. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I see in your Instagram page, which is superb, by the way. I really do think it's great that you also mentioned that you're into fitness and dating, which is a strange thing to hear about. So let's deal with the fitness first. What do you do with the fitness?
Well, my job is I'm a physical therapist, so I sort of tend that direction anyway, I think. But mostly what I do for workouts is I do resistance training, usually about 5 days a week. I like to lift heavy and go to fatigue. And then usually 2 days a week, I do something lighter like walking or yoga, something like that. But my goals are really just to improve my physique and build as much muscle as I can without gaining any fat, and sort of still look like a woman the way that I want to, but be strong. I mean, I have to lift humans for a living at work, and they're getting heavier by the day. So the stronger I can be, the better.
Yes. I mean, you are a doctor of physical therapy, which we will put into the introduction in the details in the show notes. You'll have all the links for this. So people always ask me if I miss this question, so I make sure I always include this question. So what is your meal frequency? Are you doing 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day, or are you flexible? How do you do it?
I typically eat 3 meals a day. I work out in the morning, and so I generally like to eat after my workout. Otherwise, I'm just hungry by noon or so when it's time to eat lunch. And I have played a little bit with fasting, but I think just with my history of binge eating, it's a little bit of a dangerous thing for me because it feels a bit like restricting and then rewarding. And I tend to overeat when I do, for sure, if I only do 1 meal a day. If I do more of an intermittent fasting and do 2 meals a day, it's still a little bit troublesome for me if it's planned, like I planned ahead to do that. But sometimes I'm just not hungry in the morning or just not hungry in the evening, and then I will skip a meal because I'm not feeling hungry. So it's more, if it's sporadic like that, I do fine. If it's planned, like, okay, I'm going to skip breakfast and then have lunch, then it's like a mental game for me a little bit.
Do you fast at all?
I really don't. I tried several times. I had one 24-hour fast, and then I just found myself overeating quite a bit after it. And I wasn't binging, but it felt a little bit uncontrolled like that. So it just doesn't seem to be worth it to me, at least right now.
Yes, it's good actually, because there's a huge emphasis on fasting, and I don't think it's necessary. And certainly when you're, well, it is for some people, but when you're training and trying to gain muscle, I think it's better to eat enough protein. So I'm going to really briefly ask you, why have you included dating on your profile then?
Well, I thought when I first became carnivore, I was single. I had broken up with my boyfriend. So in my first round of carnivore, we broke up. Then when I went carnivore 100% a year ago, I was single. And so I was really dreading dating as a carnivore. Like, I didn't understand how that would work. And I thought people would be so judgmental, and I didn't know how I could have a date without eating non-carnivore foods. And so I felt like if I made that a little bit of almost like a game, I'm going to document this too on my page and see how it goes. That way, if it goes terribly, at least I can make light of it on my page. But it's really gone remarkably well. Everyone I've dated has been very, very supportive. And recently so most of my dating is through dating apps. Recently, I linked my Delighted to Meet You Instagram page to my dating app. So these guys see all of it before they even meet me. And I think that's helped, because maybe the ones who would be a little judgmental about it are being weeded out at the beginning. And the ones who are okay with it, they already know, and I don't have to explain it, which has been really nice.
Yeah, I just thought it was fascinating, because that is one of the biggest drawbacks. People do worry about the social situation, but actually, if someone's giving you grief, especially when you've made such a big transformation, that you probably don't want that person in your life anyway. So I think weeding them out is particularly good. Now, you snuck in something about drinking there. Does that mean that you used to drink possibly more than you should when it comes to alcohol? Was you quite a moderate drinker? Why did you mention drinking?
Yeah, I was definitely not an alcoholic or anything, but I mean, I could drink a bottle of wine before I was a carnivore. But everything that I liked to drink was very sweet, like wine or cocktails or margaritas. And so it would be, several hundred calories worth of those things, followed by foods that were terrible for me too, because if I was drinking, I also wanted to eat candy and crap like that. And so I was definitely getting way more calories than I needed. And at some point in my 30s, I remember drinking affected me more. Like, I would not sleep as well after drinking. I would not feel as well the next day. It was definitely inhibiting my sort of health and fitness goals. And it was absolutely affecting my skin, specifically the vasculitis. Anytime I would drink more than one or two drinks, I would have a flare up of the vasculitis. So it all sort of tied in a way that showed me drinking just does not seem to agree with me. And I can't stay carnivore if I'm including drinking, because it changes my behavior to the point that I'm choosing foods that I shouldn't be choosing. Not to mention the drinks I like are full of sugar. So they're absolutely the opposite of carnivore anyway.
What's the general opinion of the people that you work with in the physical therapy field? How do they feel about it?
Well, my colleagues really do think it's crazy, but again, they've seen my skin before and after. They were there when I was hospitalized in that hospital with vasculitis. So they really can't argue, but they do sort of have this feeling of, it's working really great for you, but it's not for me. That seems to be the main sort of feeling that they have, although a couple of them have tried it. So it's starting to rub off on a few of them. And as far as like the physicians I work with, or even the patients, I don't really get into it a lot, because I work at a big hospital where going so far against the narrative, I think might be detrimental, not necessarily to my career, but maybe to my just how they think of me, detrimental to my reputation. So while I do try to talk to patients about, oh, the omelets are really good here, maybe try one of those for breakfast, I don't say, I'm on a carnivore diet and you should consider it. I don't go that far, but it is tough because I see these very, very sick patients in the hospital and they're eating, pancakes and a banana and orange juice for breakfast after they just got their leg amputated because of the severity of their diabetes. So it is very difficult for me to work in that situation when I just know so much better.
Yes. You don't know much about me, but I'm a specialist practitioner in obesity and diabetes. So any lectures or any meetings about diabetes, it frustrates me that what they lay on is donuts and cookies and those sort of things. And you think, well, hang on a minute, this is not joined up thinking. And it's frustrating to see, but you have to bite your tongue because you're right. Yeah. You have to go with the flow, I think, which is difficult. So, what about joint pain then? I mean, have you noticed any different as you work out? Obviously, that's something you've done. Have you noticed any difference between when you work out when you used to be high carb and now as a carnivore?
Well, I have kind of two observations there. One is, as far as delayed onset muscle soreness after workouts, I don't experience much, and I have heard some carnivore doctors say that that's because of the diet, but I've also been much more consistent with my workouts than I ever used to be. And when you're more consistent, you're less sore anyway. So I'm not sure that it's from the diet or if maybe it's from just being really consistent, not taking many days off, because I'm not binging. And when I would binge, I would be like, forget working out. I would stop for weeks. So that may play a role. But the other thing I've noticed is I had a knee surgery when I was in my early 20s, and it is a little bit of a nagging chronic pain that I have sometimes. And that really has improved since I've become carnivore. So I don't know if that's from decreased inflammation or, again, being more consistent with my workouts, but it's definitely better.
And what did you do to your knee then that required surgery?
I tore my ACL and meniscus playing basketball when I was 21 or 22.
Wow. Yes. And so after all this time, it started to give you less pain. Is that what you're saying since you've been carnivore?
Yeah. I mean, it hurt badly for a couple of years after surgery, but then it would just kind of act up on and off. It would swell up sometimes. And it would just ache, especially if I was too sedentary. Like if I'm on a plane for 5 hours or something, oh my gosh, it would just ache so much. And I really haven't noticed that in the last year. Maybe every now and again, a tiny twinge with inactivity, but I mean, it's 90% better. I didn't even notice because I wasn't experiencing it. So I just kind of forgot about it. But you hear other carnivores list off all these benefits and you're like, oh, I have that too, actually. And that's kind of how I realized it.
Yes. I had a lower back issue. It started when I was in my 20s, and I was told I would be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 50. So I'm 58 now, and no sign of a wheelchair. And I think that's down to the last 8 years where I've really been pretty strict carnivore. And I was going to ask you about how active you are in the carnivore space, because like I've mentioned your Instagram, which is very eye-catching. So are you quite an active person in the carnivore space, and where do you do your activities?
I mean, I would say so. I'm most active on Instagram, and I've made some really quality friendships there. And so I interact with those people, but I also do a lot of like live videos, sometimes by myself or sometimes with other people to answer questions for any carnivores that have questions, or maybe carny curious, if you will. I'm also on YouTube, and so I do a lot of videos there. And I try to stay active with events too. Like I'm going to go to KetoCon in April in Austin, Texas. So I'll meet several of my carnivore friends in person for the first time there. And I've done a couple meetups with local carnivores near where I live. And, that doesn't maybe seem like a lot, but it is. It's a lot of things every day. I'm active doing multiple things. So keeps me busy for sure.
Yeah. Who are you looking forward to meeting them?
One of them is my friend Courtney. Her page is it's Courtney Luna. She's just going to be going like me as a guest, or as a I don't know the word, the people that go to KetoCon just to watch. I'm really looking forward to Dr. Anthony Chafee. I think he's going to be presenting, and he's been a big influence on me as a carnivore. And then a lot of my other really big carnivore influences, as far as I know, they won't be there, but I'm looking forward to meeting new ones that I don't know that well yet.
So if you had somebody ask you on a live, I'm thinking about going carnivore, can you give me a few pointers to get started? What would you say?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. But I would definitely say to get an air fryer. I think that makes my life so much simpler. I can just prepare so many things so quickly, and I use that thing multiple times a day. I would suggest figuring out their why. Why do they want to do this? And if it's like, I want to lose weight, or I want to look better in a bikini, I would challenge them to go a little bit deeper, because those things sometimes aren't powerful enough to overcome wanting donuts so badly. But if your why is, I want to finally get off my medication from this chronic immune system problem I have, or I want to be able to like chase my kids around and be alive for their wedding, something deeper, I think that's really helpful. So really examine that, why you want to do this. And that's going to help you sort of frame your mind around why it's worth it. And then I would suggest eating whatever you like that's an animal product. It doesn't have to be grass-fed, grass-finished, all that, especially at the beginning. Just anything that you like, that you can afford, and have about a week or so's worth of food at a time, so that you're never left starving with nothing to eat. I like to have a few things prepped in the fridge at all times, like burger patties are really easy to do that with. That way, again, if you're in a pinch, you've got something. So those are sort of my top 3 or 4 right off the beginning.
Yes, I mean, you had a very big why, didn't you? Which was to clear up your skin, and I think having that why that makes you cry is a real big help. And I think you're right. I mean, I get this on the personal training side of things, where people come to me, they want to lose weight, and they don't want to change their nutrition. So I never take them on, because I think nutrition is the key to absolutely everything. I mean, working out is great, but if you're not eating right, your health will actually go downhill. I think that's the thing. Even if you look good, you can not be as fit as if you were eating correctly, I think. So they're really good tips.
If I could go back, I just want to mention one thing. So with my why, my skin was so bad, and that was my why, but I was still on an immunosuppressant medication that whole time. And so that was really, once I realized my skin was going to get clear, which was already a miracle, my new goal was to get off my medication, because it's poison. I mean, you can't get pregnant if you're on it. It will mess up the baby big time. And I don't even know if I'm going to have a baby, but I don't want to not be able to, because of some medication I'm taking. And so that became such a strong why for me. And I was able to get off of it about 5 months ago. So I've been extremely excited about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I feel the same about medications. If you can get people off medications, that's amazing. So do you have any other final tips that you'd like to give people?
If it feels like this is a good thing for you to do, do not worry about what other people are saying. Just do it. And if you don't want to share that information with people at first, don't. You don't have to yell it from the rooftops like many of us do, but probably once you get going and you see how it's changing your life, you're going to want to yell it from the rooftops. So at that point, you can do that. So just start, just do your best and enjoy it. It's so delicious.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And for those watching, if you want to see another success story, which is amazing like this, it's best to just click on this one here.